Welcome back everyone to Formula 1 2021 and welcome to your action-packed race review for the 2021 Italian Grand Prix. Now, as always, spoiler warning is in effect for today's review, so if you've not seen the race, I would highly recommend you go and watch it, watch the highlights, and then come back to your race review afterwards. There is so much to talk about, so much to get through, and so as always, if you are new, feel free to subscribe. Your spoiler warning is out of the way. Here is your result for today's race. Claiming his 8th victory in his Formula 1 career, McLaren's first since 2012, Daniel Ricciardo has secured victory at the Italian Grand Prix, and it doesn't end there. McLaren secure a 1-2 for the first time since 2010. 2010, the Canadian Grand Prix, Norris secures his best ever result in Formula 1 in second place, and from dead last on the grid, 20th place to a 3rd place finish. Valtteri Bottas rounds out your podium at the Italian Grand Prix. No sign of Hamilton or Verstappen. We'll get onto that a little bit later on. Charles Leclerc put on a great performance in front of the Tifosi. 4th place for him, 5th for Sergio Perez, who got in the walls again today. A 5-second penalty taking him off the podium and down to 5th place. Carlos Sainz ends his first race with Ferrari at Monza in 6th place in front of Lance Stroll. His best result of the season so far, but is still under investigation for speeding under yellow flags, so this result may change over the next few hours. Alonso is 8th, a great drive again from the Spaniard, in front of George Russell in 9th place. Points for Williams, that certainly went under the radar. Ocon rounds out your top 10 and scores the final point in P10. Nicholas Latifi ends the day in P11, will be frustrated to not score a point after a great sprint race yesterday and not a bad race today. Vettel in 12th, in the wars early on and never could recover. Giovinazzi, when will this man get that little bit of luck? 7th in quali, but a big crash in the opening laps of Carlos Sainz leaves the Italian in 13th place. Robert Kubica, could this be his final ever race in Formula 1? It was certainly an eventful one and a race to remember for Robert. 14th place takes him in front of Nikita Mazepin in the driver's standings. Mick Schumacher is our final driver to finish. He also was in the wars, contact with teammate Mazepin. We'll talk about a little bit later on. But Nikita, the first of 5 non-finishers in today's race. He's joined by Lewis Hamilton, Max Verstappen, Pierre Gasly and Paul Yuki Tsunoda didn't even start. And as we move over to our race report, of course, there's the elephant in the room, the big incident between Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen. But I want to focus on the positives, and undoubtedly today, the team that I've got to start with. If you're new around here, I always go in team by team order, and for the first time ever, McLaren get that privilege. A 1-2 for McLaren at Monza. After the disappointment on missing out on victory last season, they've come back with a bang this year. Ricciardo claims his first victory of the season, his first victory in Papaya, and with Norris in second, it couldn't have gone much better, and they now comfortably overtake Ferrari in the constructors' standings. The race really, of course, was helped by Hamilton and Verstappen. However, that start, oh my goodness, that lightning start from Daniel Ricciardo down the inside of Verstappen on lap 1 pretty much got the move done before we got to turn 1. A great move, a fantastic start and perfect way to start the race. Norris lost out to Hamilton, managed to get it back after Hamilton and Verstappen had their first little coming together, their first little moment of the Grand Prix. But both Ricciardo and Norris had really good pace in those first stages, and Verstappen and Hamilton, both of them respectively, weren't able to overtake either of those McLaren cars. And though we will never truly know what would have happened if Max and Lewis had stayed in the race, I still think McLaren would have had a great chance of victory today because their race pace was right there with Red Bull and Mercedes. Their strategy was bang on, having 2 drivers at the front of the field. Their pit stops were perfect, unlike Red Bull and Mercedes. And even when that safety car came out and Norris lost out to Leclerc on the restart, that overtake through the inside of Curva Grande on the grass. Oh, it was so good. A peach of an overtake. A perfect day for a team that have struggled for so long through those Honda years, through a couple of awkward seasons with Renault, and now of course their new partnership, returning partnership with Mercedes, their new driver Ricciardo, who's had such a shaky start to the season, has come back post-summer break with a real buzz around him. That Daniel Ricciardo we know and love, he seems to be back, and he well and truly was today. A perfect week for McLaren, and I don't think any Formula 1 fan is upset with today's results. The drivers, on the other hand, I think there could be a few of them not very happy with today's race, and Mercedes are our next team to talk about. But just before I get onto the incident, I really want to talk about Valtteri Bottas. I won't spend too long on it because his race today was a race of attrition. Overtaking is exactly what he had to do, and after a perfect qualifying on Friday, a faultless sprint race yesterday, to start from 20th. Yes, he got those 2 places on the Alfa Tauri straight away, but to carve his way through the field with no incidents, to actually make overtakes, is something we've not seen Bottas do very often this season. And to top it all off, finishes 3rd on the podium. This weekend has got to be in contention for one of Valtteri Bottas's best ever weekends. Even just the race alone was one of Bottas's best ever races. A great drive from Valtteri, and the team needed that today. Because with Valtteri in 3rd and Perez in 5th, Mercedes have outscored Red Bull today. But we got to talk about it. It's a story of what could have been. Hamilton and Verstappen, the championship rivals, colliding again. On lap 1, they got close. Verstappen losing out to Ricciardo, Hamilton overtaking Norris, and then through Curva Grande, Hamilton's got a great run, tries to go around the outside, Verstappen squeezes, Hamilton runs out of room, Hamilton over the curb and drops back behind Norris, and we get that bit of a Mexican standoff we spoke about earlier with both of them stuck behind a McLaren. And then it came to the pit stops. A dreadful stop from Red Bull. Something we never ever say, but it was awful. An 11-second stop. Christian Horner saying afterwards it was a human error on that right front tyre. Verstappen miles down behind Bottas, way in the midfield, but still with a net 2nd or 3rd place. Then comes in Lewis Hamilton. Also a slow stop. Comes out behind Lando Norris again. And Verstappen, he's right there. They're almost neck and neck. Lewis has the edge. However, Verstappen's not backing down. There's enough room as they head into the corner. He tries to go around the outside. Lewis starts to squeeze. Verstappen doesn't back out. They're both fully going for it. It's argy-bargy through the corner, and the huge sausage curb on the inside of the corner flicks Verstappen's car into the air onto the back of Lewis Hamilton. Both of them out of the race on the spot. Now, there are many ways you can look at this incident. And just before I get into my own thoughts on it, the FIA have spoken. And just 3 minutes ago, before I started recording, they have announced a 3-place grid penalty for Max Verstappen at the Russian Grand Prix. They say he could have avoided the incident. They say there was room for him to go over the corner. And the championship leader has got a penalty, which I think is wrong. I disagree with the FIA on this one, because though I don't think it's Hamilton's fault, I don't really think it's Verstappen's fault either. I think this is a slam dunk racing incident. This is 2 drivers not giving each other enough space. This is 2 drivers fully going for it, and this exact style of incident, this is really where I have an issue with the FIA. This kind of incident happens all the time, where one driver squeezes another driver off the circuit. It was something that was prevalent with Kevin Magnussen for many, many years. It was almost the Magnussen move, where he would squeeze drivers off. Happened with Hülkenberg in Hungary for that famous comment about some footballs. And it's continued to go unpunished. And we saw it in Imola earlier on in the season with Verstappen forcing Hamilton off at turn 1, giving him no room. But the precedent is there that that's hard racing, that's fair racing, no penalties. We saw it on lap 1 today with Hamilton, but we also saw it with Perez and Leclerc. We saw it with Perez and Stroll yesterday. And this squeezing off that drivers do always goes unpunished. That's the FIA's fault, that's the rules' fault. And what Verstappen did differently today was he didn't give up. He was so desperate to keep the position, he didn't skip over the corner. Should he have done that? Should he have slowed down? Should he have just ceded the position? I think so. I think he was too aggressive, and I think that's where the portion of blame goes to Verstappen. But equally, Hamilton doesn't give him any room there, and that's Hamilton's part of the blame. 50-50 there. It's a racing incident. I don't see how they can give a definitive answer and say that was Max Verstappen's fault. And in reality, that's what they've done by giving Verstappen a penalty. They've said, look, we think Hamilton is not to blame. We think Verstappen's to blame. And for me, that's really, really silly. This has been going on for a long time in Formula 1. If this incident, this exact incident, was Latifi and Giovinazzi fighting over 14th place, let's say, there would be no penalties, there would probably be no story, and championship or no championship, that shouldn't come into the equation when you're talking about penalties for a specific incident. And if you are going to dish out penalties, make it clear what a driver is and isn't able to do when going side by side through a chicane. It's a silly incident, and I'm disappointed with both of them. I'm disappointed that Lewis didn't give him the space. I'm disappointed Max went so aggressive and really didn't want to relinquish that position. He went into the side of Lewis and didn't decide to back out and skip over the corner. But I'm even more disappointed with the penalty, because this isn't going to be the last time in their careers that they come together with each other or with other drivers fighting for the title. And I suppose the final icing on the cake of this ramble about this penalty, the FIA blaming Verstappen is all well and good, but without the stupid sausage curb on the inside put in place by the FIA, they would have both rubbed tyres and continued on. Madness. Madness. A crazy, crazy incident. A freak incident, really. We've never seen that happen before through that corner, and we've definitely seen plenty of crashes, plenty of wheel banging. It's a freak incident. But I suppose my final thoughts on it, apart from the fact it's a racing incident for sure, apart from the fact I think a penalty is stupid, interested to see what Red Bull do with that, and if they decide to take a few more engine penalties for Sochi, going down the route of damage limitation. I think they probably will do that. However, my closing thought on the incident, thank God for the halo. Thank God for the halo. And I know we've closed this debate now, post-Bahrain last year, post-Belgium, for more reasons than one. I know we're all very clear and all very understanding about why the halo is in Formula 1 and why it's needed in Formula 1. It was a lifesaver today. That could have been a monumental injury to Lewis Hamilton if that halo wasn't there protecting his helmet. Even though it was there, Hamilton saying there was a bit of squishing down on his helmet that he felt, and you can see from the onboards just how close the tyre of Verstappen's car, but also the floor of his car with all those parts breaking up, are to Lewis Hamilton. I think you can solve that by bringing the back of the halo up a little bit higher and trying to reduce the degree, really, and the radius of the halo to make sure tyres can't go flying in over the top. It's a freak incident, I know, but that's the point of the halo, to stop freak incidents. I do think that's worth looking into, even if it's not possible with driver constraints getting out the car. At least look into that from today's evidence. But thank God it's there. A terrible crash. A really stinky way to end the race, to end another awesome fight that was brewing up between these pair. I think they will get over it. I think they both know it's a racing incident, and if one of them had backed out, they would have been fine. And contrary to popular belief, I do think they are both grown-ups and will be able to race side by side again at certain points this year. I don't think they're going to crash into each other every single time they come up against each other. I don't think it will happen very often. It's just, of course, disappointing we missed out on what could have been a great race between not only the championship rivals, but also the two McLarens. Hey, I'm happy with the McLaren 1-2. but it could have been that little bit sweeter today. We mentioned Valtteri Bottas. We'll talk about Sergio Perez briefly. Had that bit of a ding-dong with Charles Leclerc, skipping the chicane at turn 4. Got a 5-second penalty for it, and it cost him today. It did cost him that podium place. It ends the race in P5 behind Bottas, behind Charles Leclerc. But Red Bull gambled there, I think. I think from yesterday's sprint when an almost carbon copy thing happened with Lance Stroll, I think at that stage of the race they were confident by getting past Leclerc, not worrying about giving that position back. They could crack on with the McLarens. They probably felt they could overtake both of them, challenge for the lead, 5-second penalty or not. In reality, he wasn't able to do that, and for the rest of the race was hounded by Valtteri Bottas, who stayed in position, knew Perez had that penalty, so never did anything silly. Not a bad day for Checo, but overall for Red Bull, losing out in the constructors, gaining a little bit in the drivers with those 2 points from sprint quali yesterday. It's all brewing up to be a heck of a season. We'll crack on with some other teams now. Not as eventful for most of them, but for Ferrari, I think they'll understand that 4th and 6th is a solid return. They've lost out to McLaren, who have, of course, got a 1-2. That's not great. They would have loved to sneak a podium, especially with Leclerc in 2nd place on that restart. They really felt they lucked out there. But the pace wasn't there today. They weren't as quick as those top 3 teams. So to sneak a car in 4th, to get a car in 6th, in front of the Tifosi, to have no issues at all, which hasn't happened for a long time there at Monza, I think they can be happy with. 7th place for Lance Stroll is his best result of the season so far, but a bit of an asterisk. There is still an ongoing investigation on whether he was going a little too quickly under some yellow flags. That's normally a slam dunk penalty, and the fact it's gone on this long indicates to me there's not going to be a penalty. But definitely keep an eye on the comments, because this is something we will hear about over the next few hours. 7th place, not a bad drive from Lance. Had a fight with his teammate that was very aggressive early on, and actually I think cost Sebastian points today. However, one of the criticisms of Stroll this season is that he's been a little bit quiet. He scored plenty of points, but he's not been an aggressive driver. He's been quite reserved in his driving this season. He finally got his elbows out. A shame it was on his teammate, and Seb really struggled to get back into it after that. Was caught in that train with his teammate, the Alpines and the Williams cars, and to come away with 12th isn't great. But on a weekend where they weren't expecting much, 6 points for the team, that's one more than Alpine. I think they can be content with that. And Alpine, a quiet day on the whole, really. Alonso finishes 8th, Ocon in P10. Esteban was handed a 5-second penalty. It's just spring to mind. Fighting with Seb Vettel, didn't he? Seb, having a bit of damage from that, I'm sure, will be frustrated to finish behind Ocon. Thinking about it, I'll give you credit where credit's due. Seb was squeezed onto the grass, just like we saw with Leclerc and Hamilton a few years ago. No penalty for that. Where's the consistency, FIA? Come on. Vettel, yeah, fair. He's got every right to be angry there. Ocon gave him no room. Esteban, a 5-second penalty, I believe served it in his pit stop. That's why he's finished 10th. And overall, a quiet, meh weekend for Alpine and Aston Martin. Williams, though, it's points again. That's gone under the radar. And George Russell in 9th. And Latifi in 11th, that's great as well. Latifi had a great drive on his own. But Russell in 9th, I think is one of the most underrated drives today. Along with Valtteri Bottas, but at least Valtteri got some credit. Russell in 9th, in front of Ocon, in front of Vettel, in front of both Alfa Romeos, who I suppose had their own issues. Yes, there were 5 DNFs, and that's got to go into the equation. But on pace, on merit, 9th place, 19 seconds off the win. That's great. That's exactly the progress Williams want to be seeing. They're a good little outfit now. 22 points their season total comes to. They've got to be ecstatic with that. Giovinazzi, though, and Alfa Romeo. Oh, I feel for them. I really, really do. Gio skipping the chicane at turn 4 was fighting for 5th place, wasn't it? On that opening lap. But a story of what could have been quickly came to reality, as when he rejoined the circuit, didn't realise how close Sainz was squeezed him onto the grass, Sainz hit his rear tyre, and Gio was sent into a big spin into the barriers and really left on a recovery mission, which didn't end too badly. 13th place isn't the worst of the worst, but only finished in front of Kubica, who's, of course, very inexperienced. Robert, not a bad drive from him, especially with yesterday's contact with Yuki Tsunoda at the start of the sprint race, and when you consider that could be his last ever Formula 1 Grand Prix, and now moves in front of Nikita Mazepin in the driver's standings. Credit where credit's due. Not the career it should have been for Kubica, but I know I was very happy to see him back in the car over the last few weekends. It should be Raikkonen back in Sochi, so thank you, Robert, for all you've given to Formula 1. But Gio, I think that could be it. That's 2 weekends now, 7th place in quali, no points in the race. I don't want to take it against him because I really like him. I've been a big defender of Gio, but it's just not coming together at the moment in time. And before we go, we got to talk about Haas, because they're in the wars again. They're in the wars again. And that Alfa Romeo seat, though they've said, Schumacher's not in the running, he might be a little bit more confident now that he might be in the running because it's contact again. Mazepin down at the chicane at turn 4. A crazy little dive bomb down the inside of Schumacher. Was never going to make it. Spins his teammate around. A 5-second penalty for Mazepin. Schumacher recovered and actually overtook Mazepin again before Mazepin retired with what seems to be a power unit failure. A dreadful day for Haas F1. I think that's everything. On a day with a Honey Badger took victory, the title rivals clashed again, and Valtteri Bottas gave us what could be his best ever Formula 1 performance. Before we go, let's take a look at your driver standings, driver of the day, and race rating. In the standings, Verstappen just about extends his lead over Lewis Hamilton, 5 points between our championship duo. Bottas extends his lead over Lando Norris. Sergio Perez, a difficult weekend, leaves him still in 5th place. Leclerc, though, is hunting him down, just 14 points. The Ferrari driver is behind the Red Bull driver. Sainz is in 7th place in front of today's winner, Daniel Ricciardo, who leapfrogs AlphaTauri's Pierre Gasly. I didn't talk about AlphaTauri. Not a lot happened. A very disappointing day for the Italian-based squad. And Fernando Alonso rounds out your top 10. Another race winner this season, Esteban Ocon, is in 11th place in front of Sebastian Vettel and Lance Stroll, who currently, unless there is a penalty, leapfrogs Yuki Tsunoda into 13th place. Russell, 15 points now for the Williams driver, is in front of Latifi, his teammate, on 7. Raikkonen has 2, Giovinazzi has 1, Schumacher, Kubica and Mazepin all yet to score, but crucially Kubica is into 20th place, overtaking Mazepin with today's 14th place finish. In the Constructors, Mercedes extend their advantage over Red Bull Racing. McLaren extend theirs, re-overtaking Ferrari with victory today. Everyone else stays the same. Alpine in front of AlphaTauri, that one is very, very close. Aston a little bit further behind on 59. Williams surely have beat Alfa Romeo, and Haas at the moment the only team yet to score. Race rating, I'm giving an 8 out of 10. I'm going straight in. An 8 out of 10. A clash of the championship challengers. A Honey Badger victory. A story, a feel-good story for the season so far. A McLaren one too. Really not a bad race. It's not a 10 out of 10 or a 9 out of 10 because there were definitely quiet spells during this Grand Prix. Overtaking wasn't really a luxury unless you were Valtteri Bottas, so a solid 8 out of 10, pushing 9, but I'll give it an 8. And driver of the day, let me know yours in the comments down below. Yesterday I went with Daniel Ricciardo. Today I'm also going with Daniel Ricciardo, your race winner. What a turnaround in form. But I've got to give my Racing Reviews driver of the weekend to Valtteri Bottas. A stunning performance on Friday, a flawless performance on Saturday, and one of his best races in Formula 1 history. 20th to 3rd, could have been better without that safety car. epic this weekend. And considering his announcement last week that he's leaving Mercedes, moving to Alfa Romeo, what a way to respond. But I would love to know your thoughts on all of today's action in the comment section down below. I've got a funny feeling it's going to be a spicy one, so I will join you there very shortly. But as always, if you are new, feel free to subscribe, hit that like button if you did enjoy. But as always, thank you very much for watching, guys, and I'll see you all in the next one.